we are sitting right now a little over a week out of the midterms, and just this week there has already been 2024 chatter. Former President Trump made his announcement this week that he is planning to run for president again in 2024. Can you give us a sense of what that announcement looked like?
Sleepy, low energy, to use adjectives that he's used to describe other people before. It was very similar to what we've heard from him as well. I think if you had told me, go deliver a speech pretending to be Donald Trump and speak for 63 minutes, I probably would have been able to get 80% of that down, just having heard him deliver those same lines time and time again. There were reports people were trying to leave from Mar-a-Lago while he was still speaking, but I did speak to somebody who was in the room and said it seemed fine. People seemed really happy, and it was somewhat energetic. So I don't know, but that person was obviously in the room. So clearly they have, favoritism towards Trump a little bit.
So what has the response been from people outside of the room?
It's been a lot the same since 2015 when he rode that elevator down, or escalator down rather, where you're finding a lot of Republicans want to be rid of him, but they don't want to say that publicly. And if he turns out to be the last man standing, they're probably going to flock to him. And you're finding that he still has a lot of support from that base. I think there was a poll recently that showed he had like 34% of Republican voters would say they would vote for him. Obviously, it's still early. It's all hypothetical. There aren't actually any other candidates out there yet. But it reminds me a lot of what the Republican Party has been dealing with and just chosen to ignore for, we're looking at 7 years now.
And why are they doing that? Why does no one want to publicly say, hey, step aside?
Well, they don't want to incur his wrath. I mean, they've seen what's happened to other politicians who've incurred that wrath and been pushed aside. I mean, I think you look at somebody like Lindsey Graham, who's done that calculus and decided, you know what, he said all these negative things about Trump, but better just to eat his words and still have a political career than get tossed. The elections weren't favorable for any of the Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump. So, he certainly still carries a lot of weight within the Republican Party. And then there have also been reports that some politicians are concerned about violence. They're concerned that if they were to speak up with him, it would rile up the base, and that might lead to some sort of issue. So, I think they're playing it safe.
And did you see the New York Post's covers of Trump post midterms? They were pretty brutal. So why do you think that there is now this semi-souring towards him?
Results matter. He didn't win re-election. They didn't win the midterms. They didn't do as well in the midterms as they expected. They did not win the Senate. They barely won the House. And that matters. But that's really just giving you the Post is just giving you the editorial stance of Rupert Murdoch. And I don't believe he can vote in America. So there are a lot of people out there who do not share that position. And if Trump were to win the primary, Murdoch's not going to be endorsing a Democrat on the Post. You're going to go back to seeing the same thing that we saw several years ago.
And you report on all the investigations looming over Trump. From my last count from your reporting, they are in the high 30s. Do you think that him announcing will shield him away from these investigations? Was that part of the strategy here?
There's been speculation that's the case. It doesn't hurt. It certainly does take attention away from that. The downside to him is that the RNC said it would stop paying his legal bills once he did declare to run. So he may be missing out on tens of thousands of dollars a month there. But, it certainly can't hurt. And I think there's been a lot of criticism from progressives that Merrick Garland has been slow walking this and not really doing anything. And if that is in fact the case, and again, just speculation, but if that is in fact the case, Trump becoming a political candidate just raises his profile all the more and would make it harder to bring charges against him.
Yeah, and the midterms were really disappointing for Republicans who were expecting this red wave. But one place where it wasn't was Florida, where Ron DeSantis really won handily against Democrat Charlie Crist. So can you give us an overview of Ron DeSantis' rise to GOP star power?
Sure. I mean, he started off as a congressman. I think the first time he was on my radar was when he was hanging out in the Trump hotel lobby, and some people were taking pictures with him. And I'm like, oh, I got to look up that guy's name. It said it was a congressman. So, all right, it's Ron DeSantis. Okay. But he wasn't all that well known. Barely won an election to governor the first time, but we need to stop considering Florida a swing state, I think, at this point. You know, he just won so easily. Rubio won so easily, and Rubio was supposed to have a difficult opponent in Val Demings, and it just didn't pan out. DeSantis was running against Charlie Crist, which was just not going to excite anybody. So he was certainly benefited from that when you look at the landslide blowout. But you know, it's last report, I think he had about $66 million left over from that gubernatorial campaign that he might be able to shift somehow to support any run for presidency.
And why do you think he is able to fundraise so much? According to the Financial Times, he has reportedly raked in $218.5 million, which has reportedly broken records so far in the U.S. governor's campaign. Why do you think that is?
I think he's viewed as the most likely person to dethrone Trump. And I think that if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for somebody who shares a lot of Trumpian values and his politics, but presents it better and is not going to create as much of a problem and get people as riled up and is just more secure. You know, you're not going to be waking up every morning to see what Ron DeSantis posts on social media and if it starts any sort of skirmishes or causes a stock to crash. And I think that's the appeal. It's stability. It's Trump but stability.
Do you think Ron DeSantis has a real chance of becoming that next face of the GOP?
Sure. I mean, we're so far out, though. It's tough to say. You know, there's reports that a lot of people are considering running, in which case I think that just makes it all the easier for Trump. That was the case in 2016 when there were about 12 other candidates that were just splitting votes and Trump just kept marching all the way through. And if that were to happen again, I think you'd certainly see it easier for Donald Trump. But we'll see. You know, there's a lot of time between now and then. I don't know if DeSantis has gotten the national media attention that other candidates have gotten. You know, things do seem to stick to other candidates that won't stick to Trump. And at this point, you know, the media certainly pulled out tons of stuff on Trump. There's no doubt about his background and what his values are and his inconsistency. Whereas with DeSantis, it's quite likely that there's stuff to still uncover.
Yeah, and I know we have a long time until 2024, but do you see, aside from DeSantis and Trump, any dark horse contenders that you could see going far?
Yeah, Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, senator. He's been quietly amassing a lot of money. He did a lot of fundraising for a guy who wasn't even up for re-election. I think one of his longtime office advisors just left to go work for a PAC that is associated with him. So he sounds like he's gearing up to that, and he seems to say all the right things as well. Less controversial than DeSantis, but also not as well known. But I think he's somebody to definitely pay attention to. And then there's Nikki Haley as well. She doesn't necessarily have she's kind of dipped below the radar in the past few years. If you really want to look at a dark horse, and I don't think she'd run if it were against Trump, but you know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was elected governor of Arkansas, and I definitely see her as somebody with some ambition. She already is a household name. You know, we were just spitballing some potential VPs for Donald Trump, and if he were to run again, because obviously Mike Pence is not going to get that nod. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was one of the names I thought of first. I really think I could see him picking her. So if Trump doesn't run, I wouldn't be surprised if she does. But comes with a disclaimer that is 100% my speculation.
And speaking of those VP picks for Trump, what do you think about Kari Lake? Because if she won the Arizona race for governor, she could be seen as a really big firebrand in the Republican Party. She lost, so do you think Trump wants anything to do with her?
Well, that's a fantastic question. We did not set this up ahead of time, but I just looked at Twitter before we got on, and Maggie Haberman of the New York Times reported that Kari Lake has been seen at Mar-a-Lago today. So,
I didn't even see that.
Clearly he has. Yeah, I figured as much.
Yeah.
Clearly, you know, he will have something to do with her, unless she just went there on her own and isn't going to see Trump at all. But she was there, and she excited a lot of the same people who got excited by Donald Trump. So if you look at the old strategy, where a lot of times they'd pick a vice president who would be different than the presidential candidate just to kind of check different boxes, work towards different constituencies. I don't think Donald Trump cares about that. I don't think it's necessarily going to work for him anyways. I think, Kari Lake might be a good person for that. But it really depends on what she does between now and when Trump would have to make such an announcement, because she did lose election. She does not have any sort of platform right now. So she would need to create one. It's quite possible that might be Fox News talking head, but we'll see.